Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. What if the very foundation of modern work, the long hours, the relentless drive, the glorification of exhaustion, is not a necessity, but a carefully crafted illusion? Today's episode dismantles the deeply embedded myths surrounding labour, success, and human worth, revealing how centuries of philosophy, psychology, and economic thought have shaped our understanding of effort. From Max Weber's Protestant work ethic to Byung-Chul Han's Burnout Society, we explore how historical narratives of morality and productivity have been weaponized in the modern era. Is it truly virtue that drives us to work harder, or an invisible structure that convinces us our value is tied to output? Are we freely choosing to push ourselves to the brink, or have we internalized a system designed to keep us in motion, chasing an ever-elusive sense of fulfillment? In this episode, we dive into the insights of thinkers like Hannah Arendt, Michel Foucault, and Daniel Kahneman to expose the hidden mechanisms that make busyness feel like purpose, exhaustion feel like achievement, and rest feel like guilt. It begins with an impulse, a drive etched deep into the fabric of culture, an inherited whisper of past generations urging motion, toil, sacrifice. The Protestant work ethic, a doctrine born of faith but thriving in commerce, binds effort to virtue, pain to progress. It is the engine of Western ambition, fueling industry's dreams and silent self-reproach in equal measure. To work is to be worthy, to suffer is to justify one's existence. Yet beneath this doctrine lies an insidious paradox. Effort, as commonly understood, is an illusion. We hunch over desks, clench jaws, furrow brows, not as an act of creation, but as a pantomime of productivity. It is a ritual of strain, an unspoken belief that discomfort signifies progress. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, and exhaustion settles in, a bodily testament to labour's supposed nobility. But does such tension translate into true accomplishment? Or is it merely the shadow of productivity, a performance that soothes the conscience but rarely advances the cause? Worse still, we conflate effort with worry. The anxious mind, steeped in duty, spins in endless loops of self-recrimination, mistaking mental fatigue for meaningful work. The day ends not with the satisfaction of tasks completed, but with the heavy weight of an invisible burden, the gnawing sense that more could have been done, that time slipped through grasping fingers. The modern worker is not just overworked, but haunted, pursued by the spectre of inadequacy, of hours spent but never quite enough. This is the trap of the old ethic, the self-defeating cycle in which effort becomes not a means to an end, but an end in itself. The Puritans, champions of this creed, believed that labour purified the soul, that suffering was its own reward. Their legacy lingers, though modernity has stripped it of its divine rationale. Now we toil not for salvation, but for the uneasy reassurance that we are doing anything to justify our place in the world. But what if the equation was flawed from the start? What if work did not demand suffering, but clarity? If effort was not measured in strain, but in impact? The great deception of the work ethic is that it elevates struggle above effectiveness, glorifying the act of striving while neglecting the wisdom of strategy. To be truly productive is not to grind oneself into exhaustion, but to move with purpose, to recognize when intensity is needed and when ease is the wiser course. The answer, then, is not to rebel against work, but to redefine it, to sever the link between diligence and self-denial, to replace blind effort with thoughtful engagement. This is no easy transition. The weight of centuries presses against it. But there is power in questioning, in dismantling assumptions, in choosing deliberately how one's energy is spent. Work need not be suffering, effort need not be a cage. It can instead be a craft, a rhythm, a dance between exertion and renewal. It can at last be free. The mythology of labour has long been constructed around the idea that suffering equates to progress. It is not enough to simply work. One must endure, must strain, must feel the burn of exertion to justify their efforts. This belief is woven into the very fabric of contemporary life, a silent doctrine that shapes careers, relationships, and self-worth. We measure success not only by achievement, but by the cost extracted in its pursuit. To be overworked is a badge of honour. To be perpetually occupied, a sign of importance. But lurking beneath this narrative is a truth both unsettling and liberating. Effort, as we commonly conceive it, is often misdirected energy. There is no intrinsic virtue in mere busyness, no guarantee that hours sacrificed translate into meaningful progress. And yet, we persist in the ritual, checking emails with religious fervour, stretching the workday beyond its natural limits, equating exhaustion with accomplishment. This is not diligence but compulsion, a cycle of self-imposed penance that rarely leads to fulfillment. Even the language of productivity betrays its origins. The phrase hard work carries with it a moral imperative, an unspoken judgment that to do otherwise is to be lesser, undeserving. We do not simply aim for efficiency. We strive for effort itself to be seen, acknowledged, validated. In a culture that rewards performance over substance, the appearance of labour often holds more currency than its actual results. It is why meetings proliferate, why inboxes swell, why entire industries thrive on the illusion of necessity. The machinery of work does not pause to ask whether its motion is purposeful, only that it continues, ceaseless and unquestioned. This is why so much of our relationship with effort is steeped in guilt. To pause feels indulgent, to rest an act of defiance. We have been conditioned to equate stillness with idleness, to see leisure as something to be earned rather than an integral part of the creative process. And yet it is in these spaces of quiet, when the mind is not clenched in rigid focus, but allowed to wander, to connect disparate ideas, that true insight emerges. History's greatest thinkers, artists and inventors did not simply work harder. They worked differently, allowing room for curiosity, for serendipity, for the natural rhythms of thought to unfold. To embrace this perspective requires more than a shift in habit. It demands a recalibration of values. It asks us to dismantle the inherited belief that struggle is a prerequisite for achievement, to replace blind persistence with intentionality. It is not a call for laziness, but for wisdom, to recognize when effort is necessary, when it becomes a mask for deeper insecurities. To understand that true productivity is not about how much energy is expended, but about where and how it is directed. Perhaps the most radical act in a culture obsessed with effort is not to do more, but to question why we are doing it all. What would happen if we measured work not by the toll it takes, but by the clarity it brings? If success were defined not by sacrifice, but by alignment with purpose, with curiosity, with the deeper instincts that guide meaningful creation? These are the questions that linger beneath the surface, waiting to be asked. The answers, if we dare to seek them, might just change everything. The illusion of effort as the ultimate currency of worth is so deeply embedded in the psyche that to question it feels almost heretical. Hard work is its own reward, we are told. Productivity is virtue. To slow down is to risk irrelevance. But beneath these maxims lies an uneasy truth. Effort alone does not guarantee value. It does not promise wisdom, nor does it ensure meaningful creation. The modern obsession with work is not merely an economic necessity, but a deeply embedded philosophical construct, one shaped by centuries of moral doctrine, economic shifts, and cultural conditioning. From the Protestant work ethic described by Max Weber to the late capitalist grind culture critiqued by Byung-Chul Han, the belief that suffering equates to success remains pervasive. We do not merely work to live. We live to work, finding meaning, or at least justification for our existence, in relentless exertion. Yet, as contemporary research reveals, this deeply ingrained mindset may be more of a hindrance than a virtue. A study by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development found that UK workers are putting in an average of 7.7 hours of unpaid overtime per week, with overwork-related stress and burnout costing the economy an estimated £28 billion annually. According to the World Health Organization, excessive work hours contribute to a 35% higher risk of stroke and a 17% higher risk of heart disease. Yet the myth persists: the more we toil, the more we achieve. But is this truly the case? Weber famously linked the rise of capitalism to the Puritan belief in labour as a divine calling, a worldview in which hard work was not just a means to an end, but a reflection of moral virtue. Today, this ideology manifests in subtler but no less insidious forms. The glorification of busyness, the fetishization of hustle culture, the belief that to be idle is to be lesser. But, as philosopher Bertrand Russell argued in his seminal essay, In Praise of Idleness, this relentless drive is not only unnecessary, but actively counterproductive. The modern man thinks that everything ought to be done for the sake of something else, and never for its own sake, he observed, critiquing the obsession with efficiency that reduces human existence to mere output. This illusion of effort as an inherent good extends beyond economics into psychology. The cognitive philosopher Andy Clark, in his work on predictive processing, suggests that much of human cognition is built on minimizing unnecessary effort, an insight that stands in direct opposition to the common belief that strain is a prerequisite for success. Neuroscientific research supports this. Excessive cognitive load leads to decreased creativity, reduced problem-solving ability, and long-term burnout. In other words, our brains, much like our bodies, are not designed for continuous strain, and yet we persist, convinced that exhaustion is proof of our worth. This conflation of effort with meaning is not only psychologically damaging, but socially constructed. Hun, in The Burnout Society, argues that the neoliberal economy has transformed individuals into self-exploiting laborers, willingly pushing themselves to the brink without the need for external coercion. The result is a paradoxical state in which people feel both overworked and unfulfilled, exhausted, but unable to stop. The irony is clear. In chasing productivity, we often achieve the opposite. Perhaps the most radical act, then, is not to work harder, but to rethink the very framework through which we understand effort. What if, instead of glorifying struggle, we embraced intentionality? What if success was measured not in hours sacrificed, but in impact achieved? The question is not whether work is necessary. Clearly it is, but whether it must come at the cost of well-being, creativity, and ultimately life itself. The relentless pursuit of productivity is not just a cultural expectation, but a deeply ingrained epistemic framework, one that shapes not only how we work, but how we conceive of meaning itself. From Immanuel Kant's deontological insistence on duty to Michel Foucault's critique of disciplinary power, the historical evolution of labour as both a moral and structural force has tethered human worth to ceaseless exertion. But if work is a construct, it is one that has been weaponized against those who engage in it, ensuring that productivity remains not only a measure of output, but of self-worth. Nowhere is this clearer than in the data. According to a 2023 report by the International Labour Organization, ILO, over 55% of employees in high-income economies report feeling chronically overworked, despite technological advancements that should, in theory, reduce the burden of labour. A separate study conducted by Gallup found that workplace stress has reached an all-time high, with 44% of workers worldwide reporting significant daily stress. If efficiency were the goal, these numbers would suggest systemic failure. Instead, they reveal a deeper truth. Work is not simply about getting things done, but about maintaining a social order in which exhaustion is synonymous with virtue. The philosopher Hannah Arendt warned of this in The Human Condition, where she distinguished between labour, work, and action, three modes of human activity that, when conflated, create a world in which all pursuits are reduced to toil. Arendt lamented the rise of what she called homo laborans, the human entirely absorbed in work, no longer engaged in the kind of reflective, political, or creative life that defines true freedom. In a world that prizes effort over insight, we are seeing her prophecy unfold. A civilization where busyness eclipses thought, where the race to stay ahead ensures that no one ever stops to question the direction. This relentless momentum is reinforced by cognitive biases that equate effort with effectiveness. Studies in behavioral economics, particularly the work of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, have demonstrated that humans consistently overvalue hard-earned results, a phenomenon known as the effort heuristic. This is why a person who works late into the night feels more accomplished than one who achieves the same results in half the time, why suffering, rather than strategy, is so often mistaken for merit. Yet neuroscience tells a different story. Research published in Nature Human Behavior has shown that creative problem-solving is inversely correlated with cognitive strain. In other words, the harder we try, the less effective we become. Byung-Chul Han takes this further in The Burnout Society, arguing that modern capitalism has perfected a system in which individuals exploit themselves, believing they are acting in pursuit of personal success, when, in reality, they are reinforcing a structure designed to keep them perpetually striving. The most insidious feature of this system is its invisibility. There is no external oppressor, only the internalized voice that whispers more. If there is a way out, it lies not in rebellion but in redefinition. What if work was not an end but a means, one of many, rather than the singular defining structure of human life? The call is not to abandon effort but to interrogate its purpose, to decouple struggle from value. Recognize that meaning is not something we earn through exhaustion, but something we cultivate through intention. If we fail to do so, we risk remaining trapped in a cycle where the pursuit of productivity becomes its own justification, an endless loop in which we run faster but never arrive. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Deeper Thinking podcast, an audio essay read by me, Holly, your digital narrator. To learn more about the subjects covered today, check out the links in the show notes. Until next time.